The Varaxian Empire had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, and all that time, they had created nothing more terrifying than the battle dragons. These creatures were not born from nature, but forged through centuries of genetic manipulation and selective breeding. Living weapons wrapped in scales harder than starship armor, with 6 eyes that could see through smoke and darkness, and claws that could tear through reinforced steel like paper. The greatest of all these dragons was called Korthax the Unbroken, a name he had earned through 47 wars across 100 worlds, leaving behind burning cities and shattered armies wherever he went. But Korthax had never accepted a rider. This was the shame that the Varaxian War Council could not bear. For a battle dragon without a rider was like a sword without a hand to wield it. Powerful but directionless, dangerous to everyone including its masters every year. The Empire held the bonding trials on the military moon of Drenvos, where the finest warriors from across the galaxy came to prove themselves worthy of mounting the great beast's warriors. Had tried everything to tame Korthax over the decades. They had come at him with whips and chains, with electric prods and neural dampeners, with drugs meant to calm his mind and collars meant to control his body. None of it worked. Dragon had killed 14 would-be riders and crippled dozens more. And now he sat in the great arena of Drenvos like a mountain of scarred flesh and ancient fury, watching the newest batch of champions with something that looked almost like contempt. The stands were filled with spectators from 100 different species, all of them eager to witness either a historic bonding or a spectacular death. And the air hummed with excitement and the sharp smell of fear first. To enter the arena was a Varaxian blade master named Krelvos, a warrior who had won 17 duels to the death and bore the ceremonial scars of his victories across his purple-scaled face. He walked toward Korthax with the confident stride of someone who had never known defeat, his ceremonial climbing hooks gleaming in the artificial sunlight. His armor polished to a mirror shiny. Korthax did not move as Krelvos approached, did not even seem to breathe. And some of the spectators began to whisper that perhaps this would finally be the one. The warrior worthy of the Unbroken. Then Krelvos reached for the dragon's flank, and everything happened very fast. Korthax's tail swept across the arena floor like a massive whip, catching the blade master in the chest and sending him flying 30 feet through the air to crash against the arena wall with a sound like breaking bones. The crowd gasped, then cheered, because this was what they had come to see after all medical teams rushed onto the sand to drag away the unconscious warrior. And the announcer called for the next challenger. A Krelian berserker covered in ritual tattoos and carrying a neural lance that crackled with blue electricity. The berserker lasted even less time than the blade master. He managed to get within 10 feet of Korthax before the dragon's head snapped forward, jaws closing around the lance and crushing it like a twig. And then a single swipe of those massive claws sent the Krelian tumbling across the sand in a spray of blood. High in the stands, far from the luxury boxes where the important delegates sat, a small group of humans watched the trials with varying degrees of interest and horror. Humanity was new to the galactic stage, a minor species that had only recently been inducted into the Galactic Concord, permitted to observe these sacred rituals, but certainly not to participate. Most of the human delegation were diplomats and scientists, people whose job was to watch and learn and report back to Earth about the strange customs of their new alien. Neighbors among them sat a young woman named Alara Vance, 23 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that seemed too large for her thin face. She was not a diplomat or a senior scientist, but merely an assistant to the xenobiology team, brought along to carry equipment and take notes. Hardly important enough for anyone to notice. But Alara was not watching the warriors like everyone else. She was watching the dragon specifically. She was watching the way Korthax moved, the subtle hesitation in his left hind leg, the way he flinched almost invisibly whenever something touched his left flank, the strange discoloration beneath his fourth scale ridge that could have been a shadow, but looked more like infection. She watched as another warrior entered the arena, a cybernetically enhanced Thoran warlord with mechanical arms that could supposedly crush starship hulls. And she watched as Korthax threw him aside just like all the others, but she also watched the dragon afterward. Saw how he settled back onto the sand with a heaviness that had nothing to do with his massive size. Saw how his 6 eyes dimmed slightly, as if even that small exertion had cost him something. The trials continued until the artificial sun began to set, painting the arena in shades of orange and red, and by the end of the day, 17 warriors had been carried away on stretchers, and 2 had been carried away in bags. The crowd dispersed slowly, chattering about the day's entertainment, placing bets on tomorrow's challengers, wondering aloud how much longer the Varaxian Council would tolerate this defective dragon who refused to serve his purpose. Eora remained in her seat long after the rest of the human delegation had left, staring down at the arena where Korthax lay alone in the gathering darkness. Dragon's wounds were visible even from this distance, old scars layered over older scars, a map of violence written across his massive body, and beneath all that armor, she could see something that no one else seemed to notice or care about. She could see that he was tired. She could see that he was in pain. As the last lights of the arena dimmed and the guards began making their rounds, Alara Vance made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Though she did not know it yet, she would not try to conquer the dragon, she would try to help him. The trials continued for 3 more days, and each day brought new warriors and new failures. New broken bodies carried from the arena while Korthax watched with those ancient. Tired eyes, Alara could not sleep. Every night she lay in her narrow bunk in the human delegation quarters, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the dragon, running through the footage she had recorded on her personal tablet, pausing and rewinding and zooming in on details that no one else seemed to care about. The other members of her team thought she was being ridiculous. "It is just a weapon," said Dr. Chun, the senior xenobiologist, when Alara tried to show him her observations. The Varaxians bred these creatures for war, not for comfort, and if this one is defective, they will simply destroy it and breed another. But Alara could not accept that answer. She had grown up on a small farm in what used to be called Minnesota, surrounded by animals that her family had raised and cared for. And she had learned early that every creature, no matter how large or frightening, was still capable of suffering. The footage on her tablet told a story that was invisible to anyone who was not looking for it. She watched the way Korthax favored his left side, always positioning himself so that his injured flank was away from approaching threats. And she recognized it as the same behavior she had seen in Wounded Horses. Back home, she watched the micro-tremors in his hind leg, the tiny shakes that happened when he put too much weight on it. And she knew from her training that this was a sign of chronic nerve damage, the kind of injury that caused constant grinding pain. She watched the discolored patch beneath his 4th scale ridge, and when she zoomed in as far as her tablet would allow, she could see the unmistakable signs of infection, the swelling and the slight oozing that meant something was very wrong beneath those armored scales. "They are not trying to ride him," she said to Dr. Yuan, her immediate supervisor, during a late-night conversation in the delegation common room. "They are trying to conquer him, and he is fighting back. But not because he is unbreakable or savage or defective." Dr. Yuan looked at her with tired, sympathetic eyes. "Then why is he fighting?" Alara pulled up the clearest image she had of the dragon's wounded flank. "Because he is hurt," she said. "He is in pain, and every warrior who approaches him wants to climb on his back and dig in their hooks and use him as a weapon. And he knows that if he lets them, they will only cause him more pain." Dr. Yuan was quiet for a long moment, studying the image, and Alara could see that her supervisor understood. Could see the recognition in her eyes. But then Dr. Yuan shook her head. "Even if you are right," she said, "there is nothing we can do about it. We are observers here, nothing more. And the Varaxians would never allow a human to interfere with their sacred bonding trials. But he is suffering," Alara said, and her voice cracked on the word. "Many creatures suffer," Dr. Yuan replied gently. "The galaxy is not a kind place, Alara, and humans cannot fix everything that night." Alara lay awake until the station's artificial morning began to glow through her window. And she made a decision she could not fix everything, but she could try to fix this one thing. The medical supplies in the xenobiology lab were meant for research purposes only. But Alara had access codes, and she knew the inventory system better than anyone. So it was easy enough to gather what she needed without raising any alarms. She found a broad-spectrum antibiotic that should work on Varaxan-engineered biology, a tube of analgesic salve that was designed to penetrate even the toughest alien skin, bandages and cleaning solutions, and a small surgical kit just in case. She packed everything into a standard medical bag and hid it beneath her bunk. And then she waited for night to fall again. The guards on Drenvas were not expecting trouble from the human delegation. Humans were small and weak and harmless. Everyone knew that. And the guards paid more attention to the warrior species who might try to sneak into the arena for an unauthorized bonding attempt. So, when Alara slipped out of the delegation quarters in the dark hours before dawn, no one stopped her. The arena was vast and empty in the darkness, its sand still stained with the blood of the day's failed challengers. And at its center, Korthax lay like a small mountain, his armored flanks rising and falling with slow, labored breaths. Alara's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to turn back, to return to her quarters and forget this foolish plan. Because the creature in front of her had killed warriors 10 times her size without even trying. But then she saw the way the dragon's leg twitched in his sleep, saw the pained expression on his massive face, heard the soft, almost inaudible whimper that escaped his jaws, and she kept walking. She stopped about 20 feet away from him and sat down in the sand, crossing her legs and placing the medical bag beside her. And she waited. The dragon woke slowly, his 6 eyes opening one by one, each one focusing on her with an intensity that made her want to run. But she did not run. "Hello," she said softly, keeping her voice low and calm the way she used to speak to frightened animals back home. "I am not here to hurt you. I know you have heard that before. I know you have no reason to believe me. But I am not here to climb on your back or put hooks in your scales." Korthix's eyes narrowed, and a low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Alara lowered her gaze, making herself as small and unthreatening as possible. "I am here because I can see that you are in pain," she said. "And I think I can help, if you will let me." The dragon did not attack. He did not move at all. He simply watched her with those ancient, suspicious eyes, and Alara knew that this was the beginning of something, though she could not yet say what. The first guard found her at dawn. He was a young Varaxian soldier doing his morning rounds. And when he saw the small human woman sitting in the sand 15 feet from the most dangerous creature in the Empire, he nearly dropped his weapon in shock. "What are you doing?" he shouted, his voice echoing across the empty arena. "Get away from there. You will be killed." Alara did not move. "Please lower your voice," she said calmly, not taking her eyes off the dragon. Loud noises make him nervous. The guard stared at her as if she had lost her mind, which she supposed she might have. And then he activated his communicator and began calling for backup in a voice that was definitely not lowered within an hour. The arena was surrounded by soldiers and officials and scientists, all of them watching the impossible scene before them with expressions ranging from disbelief to fury. The human ambassador was there, pale and sweating, trying to apologize to the Varaxian commanders for his subordinates' behavior. The Varaxian War Council was there, their purple faces dark with anger at this violation of their sacred traditions, and Dr. Yuan was there, her eyes filled with tears, certain that she was about to watch her young assistant be torn apart. But Korthax had not attacked. The dragon lay exactly where he had been when Alara first sat down, his massive head resting on the sand, his 6 eyes watching the small human woman with an expression that no one could quite read. "She has been sitting there for hours," one of the guards reported to his commander. "She has not tried to approach him or touch him. She just sits there and talks to him. What does she say?" The commander demanded. The guard shifted uncomfortably. "She apologizes to him," he said. "She tells him she's sorry that he has been hurt. She tells him she wants to help. And sometimes she sings." The commander's face twisted with confusion and contempt. "She sings?" "Old Earth songs," the guard said. "Soft ones, like lullabies, high above the arena in the observation deck." Alara's colleagues watched through magnified displays as she continued her strange, slow work. She had not moved from her spot in the sand, but over the course of the morning, she had inched slightly closer, shifting her position by tiny amounts whenever the dragon seemed calm, retreating immediately whenever he showed any sign of agitation. It was like watching someone try to befriend a star. Impossible and absurd, and yet somehow undeniable. "What is she doing?" Dr. Chun asked. His voice hushed. Dr. Yuan wiped her eyes and shook her head. "I think she is showing him that she will not hurt him," she said. "She is proving that she can be trusted by never pushing, never demanding, never taking anything he does not offer." By midday, Alara was close enough to touch the dragon's wounded flank. The Varaxian commanders had tried to send soldiers in to remove her, but Korthax had risen slightly and fixed them with a stare that promised death. And no one was willing to test whether that promise was real, so they watched, helpless and frustrated, as the tiny human woman reached out with trembling hands and laid her palm against the dragon's infected scales. Korthax flinched at the contact, and everyone in the arena held their breath, but he did not attack. "I know," Alara whispered, her voice picked up by the sensitive microphones that had been aimed at her. "I know it hurts. I am going to clean it now. And it might sting a little, but I promise it will feel better soon." She opened her medical bag and pulled out the cleaning solution and a soft cloth. And with movements that were gentle and sure, she began to clean the infected wound. The dragon's muscles tensed beneath her hands, and she could feel the barely contained power in him, the strength that could crush her like an insect if he chose. But he did not choose. Instead, he watched her with those ancient eyes, and when she looked up to meet his gaze, she saw something there that broke her heart. She saw surprise. She saw wonder. She saw a creature who had spent decades being approached only by those who wanted to use him, finally encountering someone who wanted only to help. "No one has ever been gentle with you, have they?" she said softly. "No one has ever touched you without wanting something, without trying to control you or climb on your back or make you into their weapon." The dragon made a sound deep in his throat. Not a growl, but something softer, almost like a sigh. "I'm sorry," Alara said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. "I am so sorry for what they have done to you." She worked through the afternoon, cleaning the wound and applying the antibiotic cream and the analgesic salve, talking to him constantly in that same low, gentle voice when she needed to reach a wound higher on his flank. She did not grab or climb or dig in hooks like the warriors did. Instead, she asked permission, waited for some sign that he understood, and only then did she carefully pull herself up onto his scales. The watching Varaxians could not believe what they were seeing. This soft, small human, with no weapons and no armor and no augmentations, was doing what their greatest warriors could not. She was touching the unbroken, she was climbing the battle dragon, and he was letting her. As the artificial sun began to set, Ilara finished treating the last of the wounds she could reach, and she sat back against the dragon's massive side, exhausted and trembling, but also happier than she had been in a very long time. Korthax turned his great head to look at her, his 6 eyes blinking slowly. And then he did something that had never been recorded in all the history of the Battle Dragon breeding program. Lowered his head and pressed his snout gently against her shoulder. And he exhaled a warm breath that ruffled her hair, and Ilara Vance, assistant xenobiologist, smiled and placed her hand against his jaw. "You are welcome," she said. The footage spread across the galaxy like wildfire within hours of Ilara's first contact with Korthax. Recordings from the arena's surveillance systems had been leaked to every major news network in the Galactic Concord, and within days, the small human woman and her wounded dragon had become the most talked about story in 1,000 star systems. People watched the footage over and over again, billions of views accumulating as the same scenes played on screens. From the core worlds to the outer rim, they watched the quiet girl sit in the sand and wait. They watched her inch forward with infinite patience. They watched her reach out, not with weapons or chains, but with medicine and kindness. They watched the most terrifying creature in the Varaxian Empire lower his head and press his snout against her shoulder like a dog, greeting its beloved owner, and they asked themselves questions they had never thought to ask before. The Varaxian War Council was furious. They had built their empire on strength and dominance, on the idea that power was meant to be seized and controlled. And here was this soft little human making a mockery of everything they believed. "She cheated," declared High Commander Krelfax, slamming his fist against the council table. "She used some kind of human trickery, some chemical or device that we have not yet detected. Our scans found nothing," his aide replied nervously. "She carried only basic medical supplies. Then she bribed someone, or she tampered with the dragon's food. Or perhaps," said a quieter voice from the end of the table, "she simply did something we never thought to try." The council turned to stare at Elder Vosrau, the oldest member of their assembly, a warrior who had won more battles than anyone could count, but who had grown thoughtful in his final years. "What do you mean?" Krelfax demanded. The elder's eyes were distant, troubled. "We have spent 10,000 years breeding these creatures for war," he said. "We have made them strong and fast and deadly. But we have never once asked ourselves whether they were happy, whether they were healthy, whether they might have needs beyond killing and being killed." "They are weapons," Krelfax said. "Weapons do not have needs, and yet," the elder replied, "this weapon chose to let a human touch him when he would not let any of us come near." The council had no answer for that. Meanwhile, in the arena, Ilara had become something of a prisoner. She was not locked in a cell or bound in chains, but she could not leave Korthax's side, because every time she tried to walk away, even just to eat or sleep, the dragon became agitated, rising to his feet and making sounds of distress that brought guards running. "I do not think he trusts that I will come back," she explained to Dr. Ewan during one of the brief visits she was allowed. "He has been abandoned and hurt so many times. He cannot believe that anyone would choose to stay." "Then what will you do?" Daryuin Iskedalara looked back at the massive creature who had curled himself around her like a cat protecting a kitten. And she smiled. "I will stay," she said, "until he believes me." The Varaxian Council made several attempts to remove her by force. The first time, they sent a squad of soldiers to simply pick her up and carry her away. But Korthax rose to his full height and roared with such fury that the soldiers fled in terror. And 3 of them required medical treatment for burst eardrums. The second time, they tried to sedate the dragon with gas pumped into the arena. But Korthax had survived chemical attacks on a dozen battlefields, and the sedatives only made him angry. The third time, High Commander Krelthax himself entered the arena, flanked by his personal guard. Determined to drag this embarrassing human away and restore his people's honor, he got within 20 feet of Alara before Korthax's tail swept around and blocked his path. And when he tried to step over it, the dragon's head swung down to put itself between him and the girl. "Move aside, beast," Krelthax commanded. His voice, full of the authority that had bent 100 worlds to his will. Korthax did not move. Instead, he fixed the commander with all 6 eyes and made a sound that was unmistakably a warning. A low rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the arena. "He is telling you to leave," Alara said quietly from behind the wall of scales that protected her. "And I would suggest you listen to him." Krelthax's face darkened with rage. But even he was not foolish enough to challenge a battle dragon directly. So he turned and marched out of the arena with as much dignity as he could muster. The message was clear to everyone who watched. Korthax had made his choice. He had chosen Elarana because she had conquered him or dominated him or proven herself the strongest. But because she had done something that no one in his long, painful life had ever done before. She had been kind to him and across the galaxy. That simple truth began to change things in ways that no one could have predicted. Young Varaxians started asking their elders uncomfortable questions about how the battle dragons were treated. Scientists from other species began studying the footage, noting the signs of injury and illness that their own military creatures displayed. Parents showed the recordings to their children and used them to teach lessons about compassion and patience. And on 100 worlds, beings who had spent their lives believing that strength was the only thing that mattered began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong. The human woman and her dragon had not started a war. They had started something far more dangerous. They had started people thinking. 5 years had passed since a quiet human girl had sat down in the sand and changed. Everything. Jalara Vance stood now in the great chamber of the Galactic Concord, dressed in the simple blue uniform of her new position. Facing an assembly of delegates from 1,000 worlds, she was no longer an assistant xenobiologist, no longer a minor member of a minor species, no longer someone that the galaxy could afford to ignore. She was the first human peacekeeper liaison, a role that had been created specifically because of her. And her voice now carried weight in councils where humans had once been barely tolerated. Behind her, visible through the chamber's vast windows, a massive shape drifted in orbit around the station. A medical frigate modified to serve as the permanent home of the healthiest battle dragon in recorded history. Korthax was up there, probably sleeping in the specially designed habitat that Alara had helped create. And even from this distance, she fancied she could feel his presence, a warm and reassuring weight at the back of her mind. Their bond was not the psychic connection that the Varaxians had always sought, not a link of domination and control, but something gentler and perhaps more powerful. It was trust. It was friendship, was love, of a kind that had no name in any language, but was understood by anyone who had ever cared for another living thing. The council recognizes liaison bands, the Concord speaker announced, and the chamber fell silent. Alara stepped forward to the central platform, her heart beating fast the way it always did when she had to speak in public. But her voice was steady when she began. 5 years ago, I broke into an arena in the middle of the night because I saw a creature in pain, and I could not walk away, she said. I did not have a plan or a strategy or any idea what I was doing. I just knew that someone was suffering, and I had the ability to help. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates, seeing among them faces that had once viewed humanity with contempt or indifference. The Varaxian Empire called me a criminal, she continued. They said I had violated their sacred traditions, disrespected their culture, and cheated my way into a bond that I did not deserve. From across the chamber, The Varaxian delegation shifted uncomfortably, but they did not interrupt, and maybe they were right about some of that, Alara admitted. I did break their rules. I did disrespect a tradition that had existed for 10,000 years. And I certainly did not earn my bond with Korthax in any way they would recognize. She smiled. And there was no anger in it, only a quiet certainty. But I would do it again, she said. Because the tradition was wrong. The chamber erupted in murmurs and whispers. But Alara raised her hand, and they subsided. For 10,000 years? The Varaxian Empire bred battle dragons to be weapons, she said. They made them strong and fast and deadly. And they never once stopped to ask whether these creatures they had created might be capable of feeling pain, might be capable of fear, might be capable of wanting something more than endless war. She thought of Korthax as she had first seen him, scarred and wounded and so very tired, fighting off every warrior who approached because he had learned that every touch meant more pain. They approached their dragons as masters seeking to dominate, she said. They saw resistance and called it defiance. They saw aggression and called it savagery. They saw pain and called it weakness. Her voice softened. I approached Korthax as someone who wanted to help, she said. I saw resistance and asked what was causing it. I saw aggression and asked what he was protecting himself from. I saw pain and tried to heal it. She spread her hands, a gesture that encompassed the chamber and everyone in it. That is the lesson I have spent the last 5 years trying to teach, she said. Not just for battle dragons, but for every creature in the galaxy that has been dismissed as a weapon or a tool or a resource to be exploited. She spoke then of the work she had been doing. The new discipline she had helped create called restorative xenobiology spoke of the dragon breeding programs that had been reformed. The creatures that were now treated for injuries and illnesses instead of being discarded as defective. She spoke of the military. Creatures on 100 worlds that were being examined with new eyes. Their behaviors reinterpreted not as defiance but as communication, as desperate attempts to express needs that no one had ever bothered to understand. She spoke of the young Varaxians who had reached out to her, ashamed of their ancestors but hopeful for their future, wanting to learn how to build bonds based on trust instead of dominant scent. She spoke of the other humans who had followed in her footsteps, quiet people with gentle hands who had discovered that the galaxy needed their particular kind of strength, the strength to sit in the sand and wait, the strength to offer help without demanding anything in return. Humanity is often dismissed as weak, Alara said, and she could see the Varaxian ambassador shifting in his seat, remembering how he had once spoken those very words to her face. We are small and soft, and we die easily. We have no natural weapons, no armor, no claws or fangs or venom. She smiled again. And this time, there was a hint of something fierce in it. But we have learned something that many of the older species have forgotten, she said. We have learned that strength is not the only thing worth reaching for. She thought of Korthax again. Thought of the way he pressed his great head against her shoulder. Thought of the warmth in his 6 eyes when he looked at her. Compassion is not weakness, she said. Kindness is not surrender. Patience is not passivity. And the choice to heal instead of harm is not a failure of strength, but the highest expression of it. The chamber was silent now, every delegate listening, and Alara knew that she would probably never give a more important speech in her life. Korthax is not my weapon, she said. He's not my mount or my tool or my servant. He is my friend, and I am honored every day that he trusts me enough to let me call him that. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect to the assembly. That is all I have to say, she finished. Thank you for listening. As she stepped back from the platform, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. And then, starting from somewhere in the back, applause began to spread. It was not the thunderous approval of warriors celebrating a conquest. It was something quieter and more meaningful. It was the sound of a galaxy beginning to change its mind.